Howdy ho, friends and foes, and welcome to Dads on Life, your weekly episodic show on parenting from a male perspective. I'm your host, Jay Miles, and with me, as always, are my co hosts, Keith Bogan,
Good morning, good friend.
Chad Holloway,
Good morning.
and Dave Dusenberry.
How's it going, everybody?
I almost said it. It took me a second to not say his name, but Doug is unfortunately detained. He has bronchitis and isn't breathing very well to try to talk, which stupidly all of us have tried to do this show sick or done things sick, and it just never works out. We end up on mute coughing our heads off the entire time. But he kind of took his own thoughts and decided better against recording today, which is completely understandable. Having had bronchitis several years ago, it isn't fun, and you don't want to sit here and do anything. Nonetheless, try to talk for an hour. Today, as I was looking through my calendar and things like that, I noticed that 3 years ago, actually this week, we started this. So the first couple of shows were, interesting and kind of out there and all over the place. By the third show, we had something that was really wild that was going on in this country, and we'll get into that later. But because unfortunately, it isn't going. The topic of that hasn't gone away. But we're going to talk about what's changed in the last 3 years with ourselves, with our families, things like that. Let's kick us off.
Well, I have a son back at home who's listening to me right now. I mean, we started this thing with I had let's see, 3 years ago. He was a junior in college, and the other one was I guess he was
junior in high school, wasn't he?
No. He's going into his senior year of college, so I guess freshman year. But let's see, this is June. So June of 20, he had just graduated. What am I saying? June, May. He was about to graduate high school, so it's a vastly different world. Having one back home is really cool. He's in the working world now, so life is very different in that he's no longer a student, he's no longer marching band, he's no longer drum corps. The other one.
Let's just pause this for a second if he can hear us. Hi, Justin.
He can hear us in the distance. I don't know if he can hear you very clearly, but he can hear me because he's watching ESPN in the other room. And Jeremy, completely different approach because he's doing a lot of the same stuff, although not high school now, it's college. But he's doing it. He's no longer with the drum corps we grew up with, if you will. So he's got a bit of an attitude. he's advanced to the very pinnacle of the activity. But I mean, the kids are still the kids. They're still working their way through life. They're still, for the most part, like I said, learning, if you will. It is very different. I think with Jeremy, it's similar because he traveled a lot to begin with, but with Justin, it's very different because he's now living back here. Mm-hmm. Soon, in the next few months, he'll be moving out, getting his own place and all that stuff. But post college, that's sort of. I didn't remember how much of a big adjustment it was. I mean, I'm sure I went through the same thing where I finished college. And I'm like, what do I do now? That kind of thing. And for him, I mean, he just launched right into a good job and all that. But living here was very different than living in South Carolina. But so I was just thinking this morning. You saw me eating a bagel as we started the show. 3 years ago, neither of my kids would have thought in the morning to go get their own breakfast, let alone bring it back and bring one for Dad. That's what Justin.
Well, you couldn't. You kind of.
3 years ago, it would have been. 3 years ago, it would have been, Dad, you think we can have bagels this morning? Can you go get them? Or if I dared say go get it for me because Justin had a driver's license, even then, it would have been, can I have the credit card? Now that didn't even come up. So
That's cool.
It's a very different approach, which is nice. Um, and so you see some of the growth and maturation there. Um, and I'm sure that'll happen with Jeremy too once he gets out of college and actually has an income and things like that. Because he'll be back here too. By then, Justin will be gone, but Jeremy will be under my roof for a while. He's computer science, so I'm sure he'll get himself a pretty good job too. In fact, I think he's going to go work for Dave, so that's fine.
If Dave has a job and doesn't get phased out by AI.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Very nice indeed. No, but you can see the subtle changes in the behavior. I mean, it was all over Facebook a couple of weeks ago that Justin took me to a Billy Joel concert. Hear the words, Justin took me to. 3 years ago, that wasn't even in the lexicon. So, it's very interesting to see how different they are now, how developed they are now. A lot of things are very similar, but a lot of things have changed. And I will say for the record, and we can get into it as the show unfolds, but I feel like I've learned a lot about my interactions with them by doing what we're doing here, by thinking through what you guys have been my therapy session for a while, so it's great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we have another college graduate on our hands.
Yes, we do.
Let's go to him.
Yeah.
We do. So
Chad?
3 years ago, if I think back to 3 years ago, when we started, I remember I was up in St. Louis at the time. So I've moved since then, obviously, to the Atlanta area. And Frankie has now graduated. He still has a couple classes to finish up this summer, but he's in the process now. They're all online. So we just got to get through those. And I don't know, Keith, how it was with you, but I'm just like nervous. I'm just like want a job to land pretty quickly here and those kinds of things for him. Because I think he's ready to be on his own as well. And I'm ready to cut the cord as well. So get him off the payroll. But so things are going real good. He's super happy. He's being pretty particular with where he wants to work. He wants to work where it's warm. And, I've always told him, I said, that's a good idea because you have to be happy with the climate as long as you can pull that off. Right. But yeah, everything's going good with him. And then, as you guys all know, I've had a couple of family members immigrate here. So, I've got a 12-year-old now, soon to be 13 in October, learned English in 3 months, going to the school. I've got my wife who she went through a year of pretty intensive English classes, but now she can speak okay. We still have to practice more. But everybody's getting acclimated and it's been some wild, crazy changes, but it's all good. It's all good.
I remember how many shows you did from south of the border.
Columbia.
Oh yeah.
When you were, you weren't even in the country to do a bunch of our shows.
Yeah, well, and I guess the other thing too that happened about 3 years ago was that the borders of Colombia were closed, so I was locked out, for probably 6 months until I could get down there in September. So it was crazy. Even though things were kind of tight here, I couldn't even get down to see my wife, in another country. It's crazy,
Wild, man. It's wild.
Yeah.
Well, actually, because this kind of happened. This was Friday. I went to work. We got out of the car, had Dunkin' Donuts, went inside, came back out, and Rose Tattoo was playing on the Bruce Springsteen channel on XM. And it was the version that he had done with Dropkick Murphys on May 29th of 2020. Which was one of the only shows that happened at the time. The Murphys were in Fenway Park, spread out all over the infield, alone. No one else was there except for some of their crew. I believe one of the band members may have actually even been wearing a mask. Not 100% sure. Bruce was in his barn, probably, because that seems to be where where he actually ended up recording a lot of letters to you and things like that. Some of the stuff that he recorded and has done over the last 3 years was recorded from the same spot he was standing in. It was televised through Zoom or some other app. It was free. It's a free show as well. I remember sitting here and watching it, and thinking probably by, maybe summer at that point that we might be going back to shows and things like that. And for the first time, feeling somewhat normal. Now, the ironic part of that, less than 24 hours later, I'm in the hospital. That was when I fell. It's the day before I fell. I fell the next day. I was in the hospital for 6 hours, and two revelations. One, I needed help and couldn't get it alone. And two, we weren't getting out of this anytime soon.
Mhm.
Now, here I am, the better part of 3 years on. Not only do I have a home group that helps me through it, I am it's GSR, General Service Representative, and lead the beginners meeting, which I led yesterday, partially with what I just told you.
Mhm.
Now, as for the girls, right before the pandemic, or right around when the pandemic started, Delana had apparently told Elise. I didn't find this out until a couple months later. Delana had told Elise that she wanted to wrestle. In June, we just were getting back to jiu-jitsu being open. The 2020 wrestling season didn't happen. Delana said she wanted to wrestle. 2020 season really didn't even happen. 2020, 21 really didn't happen. We were able to get it. We were able to get her in for last season. And she continued on through this season. Now they're still both her and her sister are both in wrestling, I guess, camp kind of thing, at the high school twice a week. And they both may actually end up wrestling for Old Bridge this year. Delana may end up in Sauk. I don't know. We'll see. May end up wrestling for Sauk. Delana just had what she says could be her final band concert. As she seems like she's giving up violin.
Okay.
She just doesn't enjoy it that much as she used to. So,
I can respect that. I took violin as a little kid, and at one point I got tired of it, but I stuck with 4-stringed instruments and went to bass later on in life. So it's possible that she could return to music.
it wouldn't surprise me if she does. Other things that have changed. It took us a year and a half almost to get back to live music again.
Mhm.
It was August of 2021. Ironically, the old car that I had when the pandemic started was now a crushed cube at that point. That was a crushed cube in May of 2021. On my way to that first concert back, I got rear-ended on the Walt Whitman Bridge, which was a lot of fun, considering I have fear of bridges. It's very interesting to stand on the road when you're scared of bridges looking out over the water. What else? Sadie has had an interesting couple of years. She's kind of sort of coming into her own a little bit. Delana has now had her first two boyfriends,
Mhm.
which scares the shit out of me, but One of them, like I said, if you guys know anything, if you follow anything, um, she's known this kid since she was 6 weeks old. I don't know if she really talks to him much anymore, but it's we're going to the first real concert that we're the four of us have gone to. Sadie, Elise, and I are going to see um, Luke Bryan the end of June, but June 10th we're going to MetLife Stadium, the four of us, to see Ed Sheeran. So that'll be an interesting experience. At least I know it's not going to be. It definitely won't be the kind of music that I'm used to when it comes to live music. Um, as Keith and I have actually 3 shows we're going to this year. One of them being Metallica, which I still don't think he's 100% prepared for. Um, and he brought up where his kids are. I've been in his kid's life for better part of 10 years now at this point, I think. Probably coming up real close to it, 8, something like that. It's really about all I got right now. And like I said, we'll get into the first big events of besides from the pandemic and the first things like that. Uh, Obviously, we know the pandemic smacked us in the face in March of 2021. Right before that, I had a birthday party for myself late February. And that was the last thing we really did except for Sadie's birthday. That was the end of it.
I will
Yeah.
add to that, by the way, that I've watched your kids since not quite since they were born, but pretty young. And I used to enjoy coming to your house periodically. Now I'm terrified to go there because your older daughter's gonna body slam me into the ground, so I
Yeah.
can't anymore. That's it.
And she can't come to yours because you have a cat.
Well, then yeah, I'm just protecting myself at this point.
Preventative maintenance. Yeah, I mean, I think back to 3 years ago, my world had just drastically changed at that point. I'd gotten Jessica and I had gotten married on December 27th of 2019. So we had a very small ceremony. Our wedding, the total attendance, including the officiant and the photographer, was 22 people. It was beautiful. It was awesome. And we were planning on having a big friends and family reception for the wedding in the spring of 2020, around April. Um, and well, that didn't happen. So, and here we are 3 years later, we still haven't had that big friends and family reception. It just hasn't happened. I was, my oldest, my daughter was in her senior year of high school, and she was excited about planning for her senior prom. She was looking forward to like doing a senior trip. She, looking forward to, getting things rolling to start college in the fall of 2020 and all this stuff. And, my boys were having an interesting time too, because about a year prior to that, their mom's house caught fire. Basically the house, like 3/4 of it, they had to basically reconstruct almost the entire thing. They had a fire on the outside, right outside of my older son's room. Everybody got out, everybody was safe, but they lost a lot of stuff when the house burned down. And they were like living in like an apartment for about a year. Right before, and they had just moved back into their house when COVID struck. Like they were still finishing up like trim and floors and stuff like that when COVID struck. And you know, adjusting to, we found, obviously, as Jason said, we found out in March, basically, we were told like, listen, we just need about 2 weeks to take care of this, and we'll give it a couple of weeks, and then everybody will be back doing what they got to do. And that was the longest 2 weeks of my life. Um, I mean, I think about all of the stuff that we had planned for 2020. Everything from, like I said, the friends and family reception. Um, Blood Red Roses had a couple of festivals that we were looking to play. We were going to play Wet Metal in the Mountains in West Virginia. We were going to play. I think we were going to do something up in like the Chicago area. We had a really busy schedule that we planned on hitting at least 2 or 3 festivals that year, and none of that happened. None of it. It was a shock. My boys were in 6th and 8th grade at the time, and having to basically move to, you know, scramble to get them set up so that they could work from home. Seeing the schools struggle initially with setting up a system so that the kids could do their work from home. Hearing the rampant reports of kids just kind of phoning it in for the rest of that year, and the school's been like, well, there's really nothing we can do about it. We're just going to basically pass anybody anyway. Um, it was wild, May 2020, you know, I like to say with 2020, like there was so much stuff planned, and you look at 2020 as having clear vision, but nobody could have foreseen what that year was. Nobody. Um, my daughter, my heart broke for her because she didn't get to do her senior prom, which I mean, she was kind of excited about, but the really big thing that she was super excited about was she wanted to walk for graduation. That was her big thing. She wanted to walk for graduation. She wanted to walk up there, get her diploma, wear the robe with the tassel and the hat and everything like that. She wanted to walk for graduation. And there was a point in time where they weren't sure if that was going to happen. It was hard. She they didn't they weren't able to figure it out, the logistics, the location, and get the clearance from the state and everything until about the end of July. Thankfully they were actually able to do something. They did it at the Trenton Thunder baseball stadium, where you could do a lot of social distancing. They basically assigned one family per row there on opposite sides of the rows. So like you had a ton of room around you during that time, but they were able to work it out so that she could walk for graduation, and they did it at the stadium. And I'm thankful at least that they were able to do that for her.
And
And
Dave, like, if I can just interject,
yeah,
thinking about this and just how everything was just like discombobulated for all of our kids at that time. It just,
yeah,
for us growing, we grew up one way, and then our kids had to have their lives put on hold and have all these kind of weird things go on, and just attending from home, not being able to go to graduation. For Keith and I kids, it wasn't kind of a traditional college experience, which everybody, that's a great part of your time in your life. And, we just were really messed up at that time. So,
yeah, and I think about that, like when I was younger, there are certain events that happened in the world that framed who and what I am now for the rest of my life, and the pandemic is going to frame our kids' lives for the rest of their lives. It's going
yeah,
to, an event like that, um, will stay with them, and in ways that, I don't know if it'll generate new ideas, new ways of doing things with that kind of in the back of their mind, or you know, or what. I don't know what the impacts are going to be, but we'll see. You know,
yeah.
my youngest was able to kind of take that work from home thing and kind of really, he was the one of my 3 kids to really kind of grab it and own it and take advantage of it, right? So he's always been a bit ambitious when it comes to school anyway. Um, but he really, he worked hard while the kids were all, working remote. He kept up on his studies, really did well, um, to the point now where he's looking to take pre-calculus over the summer, so that way he can start taking Calc 1 next year as a sophomore in high school. Um, and he's got his eyes set on going to MIT and joining NASA, and that's what he wants to do. And he kind of took the time of the pandemic when a lot of kids, there were a lot of kids that slacked off, didn't attend classes, or kept their cameras off and slept through classes and kind of handed in things, whatever. He actually took ownership and got his work done and was self-motivated to get his stuff done, which is a skill that I try to pass down onto the kids, but it's not always one that gets absorbed. So it's good to see at least some of that appearing through, Um, and here we are 3 years later. My oldest boy is going to be starting his senior year of high school next year. Taking his driving lessons, looking to get his license soon, and getting prepared for what he's going to do for college, next summer. And my youngest is just keeping his eye on his goal about, finishing as with the best record he can in school and getting into MIT. Jess and I are 2 to 3 years away from moving on from my beautiful state that I've lived my whole life and going to some place that's actually affordable. And it's a different world in a lot of ways. It's a different world in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's funny, like Jason, you were talking about music and going to concerts, and obviously a lot of that stuff got shut down over the last few years. There was a point in time in my life prior to this that I was really excited about going to see shows and things like that. And it's funny, aside from my band playing, I really don't go see live music anymore. It's like it's lost a step in the priority. I don't know why that is, but I could say that I think just being home and part of the pandemic is I think that's affected me in that way. I definitely think so.
It's very interesting that the three of you, when you were going through what the last 3 years meant and how we've changed, unpacked a lot of stuff that happened during the pandemic. And when I talked about it, I talked about the beginning product and the end product.
Yeah.
And I didn't because it's uncomfortable. What I watched them go through.
Yeah.
You talk about graduations. Jeremy didn't graduate. We did a faux ceremony where, and it was filmed, where they would get into their cap and gown and they would walk across the stage, but there was no one there. And the only two people who were allowed to attend were his parents. Justin would have attended too, but he was away at college. And so I don't think that phased Jeremy as much. I mean, I think he would have liked to have done it, but it was something that was missing. The height, that senior prom, the end of the marching band. I'm sorry, the robotics season got scuttled. He certainly missed stuff there, and then of course his whole freshman year was literally in a dorm.
Yep.
He literally didn't leave his room in his freshman year of Ohio State, so he missed the entire marching band season, where they did marching band, but they were all in masks. They recorded their performances, and then the performances were played on the video board at the games, but they weren't there. So
weird.
You kind of missed the whole point of it, if you will.
Yeah.
So his whole freshman year was a shit show. It was just, ugh. And I think his grades suffered because of it. And he's still sort of spotty. I mean, he's still got a very good GPA, but it's not quite what I think he expected. And he definitely retreated more into his video games, I think, than many others did. But he's working with that. We'll put it that way. Justin really struggled. He finished in 2021. He finished his undergraduate work, but the last year was so difficult for him that he went from a very good GPA to one that just barely got him into graduate school. There was a certain minimum requirement, 3.5, to get into the graduate program. And he initially, in fact, didn't get in. They booted him, and he had to, apply for special dispensation because of the pandemic to be allowed to be in the program. So thank God they did, and he finished. But it was a real struggle, especially for him. And so both of my kids, much like their father, I won't speak for their mother, but much like me, ADHD, ADD, whatever you call it, inability to attend. So I taught them at an early age. The thing that I learned when I was in school was sit in the first 3 rows. Make sure you're up close, make sure you're asking questions, make sure you're interacting. And when you're on a screen, you can't do that.
No, you can't.
So it really impacted them in ways that was not positive at all. Um, and the pandemic also impacted people's ability to, you know, like get jobs and internships. So even though neither child was intending to work an internship during their college career because they're so dedicated to drum corps, when drum corps got wiped out in 20 and 21, the opportunity was there for an internship, especially for Justin, and it didn't happen. So, you know, that getting him off the payroll thing, I'm thinking to myself, as he's going into his graduate year, how is he going to get a job in accounting when he's never had a job in accounting, when he's never had an internship? And what saved his butt and got him a really good job at KPMG was that he went to one of the best accounting schools in the country.
Yeah.
So he was cherry picked. You know, he and a lot of his student, you know, his classmates, I'm sure, were cherry picked to make sure, you know, because they came out of that program. And he's doing very well. He's doing extremely well at KPMG. But I look at it, and I look at the same thing with Jeremy. I'm like, he's going to graduate college, and he's just going to have marching, you know, a drum corps for each summer. He's not going to have a computer science internship, and part of that is for him. It's more about drum corps than it is about the pandemic. But there's so many implications of what the pandemic did that changed the course of their lives.
Yeah.
And so many things that they missed out on. I still remember watching Justin's graduations, and they did it was easier to do a graduation where he was because he was in South Carolina. You know, the pandemic never happened there, so they could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
But they still did a socially distanced 1,200 people on the football field, and the football field is massive there. So it's one of the bigger stadiums in the country. So 1,200 kids on the field, all about 8 to 10 feet apart. And you know, they did what they were supposed to on the field, and they literally went around the stadium and put stickers and tape on various seats. You can sit here, you can sit here, you can't sit here, you can't sit here, to socially distance people. And of course, the audience didn't give a rat's butt, and everybody pressed up to the front and, you know, completely ignored the tape. It was South Carolina. What do you expect? But you know, just it was. I remember bits and pieces because it was about 4,000 years ago when I graduated. I remember bits and pieces of sitting next to somebody and being excited and having those water cooler on the football field conversations, or in my case, in the athletic center. They're 8 to 10 feet apart. They're hardly talking to each other at all.
Yeah.
So, you know, what a different type of graduation. And that happened 2 years in a row for Justin because his graduate work was 1 year. So not as, and his second graduation was indoors. Now that was May of 21. So we were technically still well in the pandemic. South Carolina, they don't care. They were closer to each other at that point, but they all left the building as soon as they got their certificates. They would literally walk across the stage and walk right up a staircase and leave. So by the time they got to the back of the room, back of, you know, the 1,200 people, there was nobody left in the arena to watch them. It was ridiculous. Yeah, it's very interesting. I have this, I can feel this tendency to want to talk about how wonderful they're doing today and completely bury the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to talk about. It's uncomfortable to remember watching and go through that stuff, but it's all part of their growth, part of their maturation. So they're very, very different people in many ways than they were 3 years ago, but that's probably the biggest impact right there.
Yeah. You know, and I think, you know, I see it with my kids, and I think, like I said, you know, the time that we've spent, and, you know, when you go through something like that, one of the key parts that kind of frames who and what you are is how you adjust to it. You know, what do you do? You know, this is your reality. How do you adjust to it? Do you come up with a new way of thinking, of doing things, of following up with things? Do you or do you just stick with the same path that you're working, even if it's not a conducive environment for it? You know, you can use the example of South Carolina. They're like, we're not going to adjust to this. We're just going to do what we always did because it's not happening down here, you know? And, you know, but obviously we've seen places here in Jersey and in other places around where, listen, you know, we have a new reality that we're working with. Now we need to adjust. My company did it. I was never a work from home guy before the pandemic. You know, I never had a home office. I was a 5 day a week go in the office kind of guy. And since March of 2020, I have basically been working full time here from the house. And now I love it. It does come at a social cost. I do miss socializing with folks in the office. You know, it's nice. It almost feels like a novelty when I can go in and there's more than like 5 people there. You know, if we can get the whole team together, it's almost like a novelty now, where before it was just something that happened all the time. Um, but you adapt and you adjust, and if there's any skill set I hope that my kids take from these 3 years, is that they've had an opportunity to learn the skill on how to adapt and adjust to what's going on around them to give them a better position on what's going on now and take advantage of it where they can.
Well, and you know, I think you know, it was some events. There were events that happened in our lives, but I think we all have those events, right? Like
Yeah.
the last one I can think of, and it's part of the equation. And I remember, and I heard that, you know, Dave, to your point about MIT, your son wants to go there. I learned this from a guy from MIT. Says, "Oh, the unknown is always part of the equation."
Yep.
And so, but we had like 9/11. That really messed me up for a few days, you know, or for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, just the things that were happening because you feel very vulnerable. You feel like the government has let you down in a certain way by letting these people infiltrate our society. Even though I'm in the Midwest, you guys were much closer to it than I was, as we've discussed on other shows. But you know, it's always something. And to your point, Dave, it's like the ability to adapt and to recover from that. And we are, you know, we do become different people because of it, but we adapt and we move on. And that's the important part of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard and it's scary and it's uncomfortable and you know, when stuff like that happens, I mean, I can even feel it right now, just feeling like getting emotional about like how the world was before and after, and the pain and the discomfort and everything that you have to do to kind of work on and work through whatever that situation is to get to where you are now. It's hard. It sucks.
Yeah.
But it makes, you know, I say it all the time that change is necessary to grow, and change by its very definition is uncomfortable. Um, and it sucks, but you have to, or you just stay where you are, you know. And I hope with my kids, with my three, that this time in their lives leads them to grow in ways that maybe wouldn't have happened without it, you know, that they find ways to adapt and change their thinking and work with what they have now, and maybe give them a skill set that I couldn't give them if everything was just the same and comfortable.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Exactly. And you know, I think to that point, I think, you know, and on one hand, I think we lost some things,
We
you
did.
know, like having to go, you know, many kids, I think, you know, as you were saying earlier, went through the kind of the online education process, and there was some education loss there. But I think on the other hand, I think there are other skills that were gained, um, that aren't necessarily they would not have necessarily learned, and that those adaptation skills and being able to move forward.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for self-motivation, right? So I'm a big advocate of taking the initiative when there's things that you have to do that you know that you need to do, and not relying on others outside of you to remind you that they need to be done, but to remind yourself and develop those skills to get them done. I will say that with the learning from home, I saw many kids that without that constant teacher kind of push to, you need to get this done every day, you know, in person, when they were left to their own devices at home, it was interesting to see who kept up on doing their work and who just kind of let things slack without that oversight. You know,
Right.
my older son was more of the let things slack without that oversight. He got better, but he's definitely somebody that needs to have somebody remind him of the things that he needs to do. And personally, that drives me nuts. I can't freaking stand it. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, dude, you need to be in control of you. You know you need
Mhm.
to do these things. Whatever reminder, skill set, whatever you need to do to make it happen, that's what you need to do. I'll work with you on that, but I'm not going to there's going to come a point in time where you're going to be out, and I'm not going to be here to remind you, and nobody's going to be here to remind you, and you're still going to need to get it done.
Right.
And you know, I think the pandemic kind of really, as I said, I talk about my younger son. I think he was able to take that and run with it. And I think that I see that manifesting now, even as he's going and finishing his freshman year, going into his sophomore year. He does the robotics, he does the advanced AP classes. He takes the initiative to cook things at home and prepare food and take care of his laundry and do his chores without having to be prompted for it. And I kind of, while that's a skill set I encourage in my children, I think the pandemic kind of helped him in that, because he's like, well, I need to get this done, and dad's working all day downstairs, and it still needs to get done. So
Absolutely.
I mean, hopefully it helps him.
Absolutely.
I'm one of two kids on the way to that. The older one's got all that. Younger
Yeah.
one, yeah, we'll get there.
And let me ask this. So when we talk about the being not very motivated at a young age, I would say I wasn't either. I wasn't really motivated until I was probably 20. School, you can have it. To me, it didn't matter. But then something hit when I was about 20, and then it just kind of grew over time, as I kind of like was kind of looping my life through my head and my experiences, and was able to finally figure out how to crack the code, if you will.
Yeah.
But no, I was not motivated at a young age. My parents were like, take out the garbage and mow the lawn and those kinds of things. So
I was the same way until I turned 26 was my age. 26 was my age, because when I finished high school, I did 2 semesters of community college down in Ocean County. I was like a C, maybe average, because I wasn't really interested in school. All I wanted to do was go out and hang out with my friends. That's all I wanted to do. So I moved out, got an apartment with some friends in New Brunswick, worked a bunch of retail type jobs for a number of years, fell on my ass financially, learned that, there's things that my moment was, there were things that I wanted to do that I couldn't afford to do. And that pissed me off. I was like, there's stuff I want to do, and I don't have the means to do it. So I need to develop a skill. So that's when I went to school, and I got my degree in computers at 26.
Yep. Absolutely. And I had a similar experience. I had, even my first couple of years of college, I was always on academic probation, and I had like a 2.0 going into my junior year, but something clicked that junior year, and it was 4.0 after that. And that, I mean, even to the point where I could get scholarships to other universities and things like that to continue my education. But yeah, it's just a matter of that kicking in.
I say, and this is especially true with my oldest, with my daughter. So she moved out in November, right? So she's got an apartment in town. I've mentioned it before. And with my daughter, she needs to learn hard. She needs to fall on her butt and be in that and feel that discomfort of not knowing what to do, to really kind of get her motivated to do what she's got to do. Teaching and guiding work to a point, but they don't sink in until she actually has to do some type of practical application of it when she's not feeling very good about it. Yeah. And I hope, I know as a parent, I mean, that's one thing that we always want to be able to provide our kids. Like, you need to have a certain level of things, skills, mindset, attitude, work ethic, in order to basically do what you need to do when you leave this roof, right? You're going to have expectations. You're going to have responsibilities. You're going to have the stuff that's going to go wrong. So you're going to have to know how to acknowledge it, think it through, process it through, and even change direction if you have to. It's not easy.
Yep. Absolutely.
I know with me, it was, I was working part-time in a radio station before I graduated college. I was working. My last semester, I worked almost full-time, pretty much. Was working 3-4 days a week for CTC. By the end of the semester, I was working full-time by the end of the semester. And then they couldn't actually, it was happening. I knew it was going to happen, but they couldn't officially hire me until I had graduated. I graduated in May, and the next day, pretty much, I had to take the day off to go to graduation from work to go to graduation. So, yeah, I was already working full time for the radio station before I graduated. We did that for 4 years, and then you realized you couldn't do anything, raise a family, anything like that, get married, anything on what I was making. So I left. And I still ended up, you know, I loved radio, still do. Um, that's part of, like I said, there was always an idea to do something. That's why we're part of why we're here.
Yep.
I remember the conversation, and I know I brought this up before. I remember the conversation of what gave me the idea to do this. Obviously, it was a conversation I had with Keith. Keith and I were on our way home from, and I had had a horrible week at that point. We had massive issues with my car. We had a massive storm, and our basement was flooded. I ended up having to work on it for 3 or 4 days to get everything taken care of. And Keith and I went to see Foreigner, Past, Present, and Future, which was, they brought back some of the original guys of Foreigner, then had Kelly Hansen do his thing with his part of the band, Mick Jones, and then the whole band got together and did a set. And we left, and we're on our way back from Atlantic City. It was probably, I don't know, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. And we're stopped at Wawa, I'm bullshitting, and he tells me a story about, I believe it was Jeremy, about some kind of, it's 5 years ago. I don't remember exactly which one it was. I think it was Jeremy, though. Told me about a health crisis, and I remember coming home and still thinking about it Saturday morning, and waking up still thinking about it Sunday morning, and I start goofing around on my phone, and I said, let me look something up, and I looked up. I know there was parenting shows all over the place because I used to work in one at CTC. I used to work with a pairing, a guy and a girl. He's actually a comedian who's done pretty well for himself, been on TV a few times, worked on The Sopranos and this and that. And I believe he hosts a comedy show now weekly at Catch a Rising Star or something like that. And then he actually just was telling me had signed a thing for the cruise ship circuit, and he's pretty, one of these days I'm going to get him to come on with us. He actually almost was on with us for the show that never happened. He was supposed to be the co-host because I forgot, maybe Chad or Doug wasn't going to be there. So I had Buddy going to come in, which would have taken an interesting twist even more, because we were going to do George Floyd, because that just had happened. When I fell, it was a week before that. It was Memorial Day weekend. So we were going to do George Floyd, and we ended up not doing that show because I fell. Which probably would have been really interesting to have a comedian on there for that. And then I remember sitting there and looking at my phone and seeing that there were several shows, a lot of shows that are mixed host of guy and girl. There's a lot of female perspective shows for parenting. I looked and realized, oh, there's not one for fathers. There's no dad show. What? That that's not that can't be possible. And I think still to this day, we're one of the few
Yeah.
that do it from our perspective. Now, for lack of a better term, um, depending on the show, there are some of us, three of us possibly, I would say. Sometimes I think Doug has done it occasionally too. I don't know about Chad. I think maybe he has. I know Dave, Keith, and I definitely have taken, if you want to call it, the female perspective of things.
Mhm.
But it's definitely, like I said, if you go back and listen to good majority of these shows, you're going to find it. You don't have, and you don't have to look very hard for it. It's there.
Mhm.
That perspective is there because, um, for lack of a better word, some of us are in tune to our feminine side for sure. But yeah, like I said, it started on a conversation that I had with Keith. And here we are. It was about 6 months, 8 months later. It took me a good 5 months to start to see what direction I wanted to go with who and who was going to join me. Pretty much 2 weeks after I had started to come up with the idea, Chad's name kind of kept running around my head. And then I found out more about what was going on in his life and his perspective of life and what was going on, with Anna. I went, oh yeah, like that's a good one. That's a good one. And then strangely, the fourth spot was, it took me a good probably 2 months to figure out the direction I was going because it was between Dave and Doug. I don't know if Dave knows that,
I do not know that.
but I was going back and forth of which
Interesting.
one I was going to do it with. Different perspectives.
Mhm.
Then I started to realize, you know what? We have the two separated dads. He is in a situation. We have one stepdad, two. So, let me move away from that.
Mhm.
And I went with Doug having a similar perspective of me, but having boys and older than I do.
Yep.
So I kind of went, okay. And then I obviously Dave's been a friend for a long time at this point as well. And we had done a roll your own kind of thing where we had somebody join us, and he stuck around for Vince, and he stuck around for about 3 or 4 months. It never gelled. To me, it never really, it was always just kind of, there were moments where it just was like, okay. Part of that was also Vince could be a little long-winded.
Mhm.
And at times, like I'd sit here and clock it, it was 6 or 7 minutes. It's kind of like, okay, take a breath, buddy.
Yep.
But Dave again joined us as we should actually do the roulette thing again, maybe one of these days, because I have a feeling we might actually get a few more people to do it. Maybe we'll do that early summer.
I'm sort of curious, Jason, as we wind our way towards the hour. When you first started doing this, when you first started suggesting that we do this, was this a pandemic thing, or did you
Nope.
actually think we'd be here 3 years later?
No, it wasn't a pandemic thing because when this was kicked, you got to remember it was November when this idea of 19, when this idea started kick, there was no pandemic. There was no sites of anything like this. It was fortuitous that we were stuck indoors for a year and a half, because if you look back, there are very few weeks in that first year that we missed. I
Yeah.
think I counted and we did 40 shows in 52 weeks. Something like that.
It's wild.
Now we've done probably 75 or 80. I think we're at now close because, and then you look at the 2 years and we've only done maybe 20, 25 each year. So obviously things have changed, but no, it's just fortuitous that it all fell into place together. And now bringing up Zoom, using Zoom as a platform, and I'll put it in perspective in another facet of my life. The fact that as they are about to print for the first time since before the pandemic, the books that we carry for mini books where we sign the back of them and give phone numbers is from March of 2020. They have not printed new books for AA for mini books in 3 years. And I believe there's a chance that the mini books for the first time will have Zoom meetings. And I can say that Zoom, when it comes to AA, saved my life. If it wasn't for Zoom, because the 2 meetings that I attend usually regularly were 2 of the first ones to come back. Ours was one of the first ones. 6 weeks after it shut down, or no, not 6 weeks. 6 weeks after I fell. So it was 3.5 months. 3.5 months after the pandemic began, we went back to meetings. And as a small microcosm of, at least a microcosm of doing pretty well, we didn't have to shut down the meetings again. There were very few cases in the group itself of COVID, and it was, they disappeared for a couple of weeks, got better, and came back. We never had to shut down the meeting because there was an outbreak.
I will point out, by the way, I did not know what Zoom was when the pandemic started. No clue, never heard of it before. To me, it was something college students used, but I'd never heard of it myself. That was my first introduction. It did allow me to spend more time with my kids while they were away at college, which would not have happened without the pandemic.
Neither would, and I know you're a little bit emotional, so I really don't know if I should bring this up, but you were able to you had a relationship and the weekly conversations, and you still have with your remaining brothers as well. So
yes, and most of that was actually by phone, because we would go out every day at 3 o'clock during the first year of the pandemic. We would all walk wherever we were and do a 3-mile walk, or some distance. Mine was 3 miles, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we would do that by phone, but we also started, and now to this day, do a Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Zoom call. It was all 4 of us in the beginning for a long time, obviously, and then now it's the 3 of us. So that certainly, there was a lot of things that changed, and that call also, when my sons were here, gave them an opportunity to see my sons more often than they would have seen them as well. Which wasn't very often, but every now and then.
So yeah, here we are 3 years later, and we push towards, almost 100 shows at this point. We'll keep pushing forward. Did I see this continuing? Yeah. When I put this together, I put it together with the thoughts of, if we had to change people, we would, but you have a core group of people that, maybe 4 or 5 years even on, that we'd still be doing this, and I'd be able to say that. Here we are 3. So, and hopefully we can ramp it up a little bit more next year to where we can do more. But if we can't, we'll try to do at least close to the same amount because I enjoy doing this. If I'm quite being honest, I enjoy doing this. Yeah, we fight. Yeah, we have arguments and have our moments where we want to kill each other and tell each other to fuck off, which I won't say that, which I won't deny that. Doug and I have told each other pretty much to fuck off a couple of times in the last few years. The last year, especially, probably, or we wanted to. But I will also admit that after a couple of conversations, that Doug and I are on a hell of a lot better foot than we were 6 months ago.
I don't know what it's like to tell Jason to fuck off. Hold on a second. Let me think about that for a minute.
I mean, look, I'll say, obviously I'm a huge fan of psychology and human behavior, right? They're my big things, but I also I love hearing about life and experience from other people's perspective, right? Because everybody sees the world differently. Everybody looks at the world, everybody interacts with the world differently. Everybody has something else to give to the general world that we live in. And from the first time that I was brought in as a guest to chat with you guys on this, I'll echo Jason. I love doing this. I love chatting with you guys and getting, sharing my thoughts and getting feedback on it, and then hearing how you guys look at things and having it give me more information. I mean, it's refreshing to see, because obviously all of us raise our children in we've all raised our children in different environments, in different ways, in different and I've seen some consistencies, some similarities, even with our different perspectives on things, on how we approach raising our kids. And that's something I don't know if I try never to make assumptions, but that's something that I don't know if I would have guessed. That people who see life and have lived life in drastically different ways can still show some similarities when it comes to parenting their kids. And I've seen that with you guys, and I think that's really cool.
Well, it's a general life lesson that even and I'm not going to get into politics per se, but there's so many differences in the world, but in fact humans in general are much more similar than they are different.
Mm-hmm.
And when we scream about gun control and abortion rights and things like that and all the other crap that hits the media, we forget that we are of the same species, of the same origins, if you will. We're much too focused on our differences, and we forget very easily what our similarities are.
Yeah, and that's where, being able to do root cause analysis and get to the core element of whatever argument, point, purpose, or whatever it is that you're talking about, you find within that core there's a lot of similarities that people tend to overlook with garbage, like you were saying, Keith. We color that stuff with things that get reactions for some reason or another, and I don't get it. It's not my thing, but it's cool to see, talking with you guys, to get to those core similarities and kind of really work on it and work through that stuff and see how we take those core things and then use them in how we take care of our kids and ourselves.
I'm looking forward to continuing this discussion when Doug's back to find out the differences in his kids' lives between pre-city council and post-city council.
You got 2 hours on that?
and as you said earlier, Jason, how much the media has impacted his kids.
I think that's a pretty good place to leave us, but I'll leave with this. On the back of my shirt, I have a Shinedown shirt on. Not the one I usually wear, but this one kind of surfaced ironically yesterday. On the back of my shirt, it says, "I created the Sound of Madness."
Mm-hmm.
It's from the Shinedown song, Sound of Madness. And for all intents and purposes, for this, I did.
Mm-hmm.
I created the Sound of Madness. I still can't believe, get my head around, it's been 3 years. But I want to leave this with, I love you guys. Thank you for dealing with all of our idiosyncrasies for the last 3 years. And I can't wait to see, where we go from here, because away is not something I'm doing. We're not going away.
Nope.
We're going to try to strengthen this a little bit to try to be here a little more often. We'll see if that happens. So we'll leave it there. From all of us here at Dads on Life, take care, everybody. And of course, Keith, eat my shorts.
Chomp chomp, baby. Chomp chomp.
Have a good one, guys.
Take care, guys.